Hello, I'd like to talk about AAA horror and some of the problems with it. This is actually something I wrote about quite a bit on the forum, but probably seems worth elaborating on and sharing with a hopefully larger audience. This year seems like a good idea, or good year for horror game fans with The Evil Within and Alien Isolation, both coming out, and of course, Neverending Nightmares. But I'm just talking mostly about the AAA stuff. But one thing is that people are like, oh, is horror going to have a renaissance? Is it going to go back to the good old days? But I think that it's not that horror is not well suited for AAA games these days, and that's not because I don't want it to be, but I think it's a question of finances. So, firstly, let's look at the movie industry. Everyone draws parallels to the movie industry, and I think it's not always fair, but one of the things that, if you've noticed the trend over, I don't know, the past 5 years, or maybe 10 or whatever, is there's a huge movement to these blockbuster, what they used to call summer blockbuster films, but now they're coming year-round. I mean, if you look at, I don't know, Captain America just came out, and then soon there's Godzilla and Spider-Man 2 and all this other stuff. And then also there's a huge amount of CG, family-friendly movies. I don't know, probably two or three from some studios. I think DreamWorks probably puts out 2 or 3 a year, and there was Frozen from Disney Feature, and Pixar does a bunch. And I think that, and then even there's other studios that still do them, and Sony Pictures, Rio, I don't know. There's a lot of them. And so I think there's a number of good articles written about this, and I wish I could remember where I read them, but basically they're talking about how as movie budgets rise because of special effects, they sort of have to be lowest common denominator entertainment. They need to be able to sell the movie, and so they want to, get the 12-year-olds to, I don't know, 40-year-olds or something. And that audience is pretty dependable. They see a lot of movies, and they like, predictable things, comic books, CG, things like that. Basically, I think we're seeing something similar in video games, because as budgets rise, the cost of creating a AAA title rises. I mean, we're probably, I don't see numbers for AAA titles, but I mean, we're probably looking at like 50 to 100 million or something. I mean, is probably a lot of the next gen budgets. I mean, especially if you take into account marketing. That's a lot of money. You have to sell a lot of units, and it's interesting. I think someone mentioned on the forums, like, Square Enix said, "Oh, we didn't sell enough copies of Tomb Raider. We needed to sell 6 million to break even, and things like that." And if you look at it, like 6 million is a lot of units. That is a ton. And I mean, you have to create something that is super accessible and has a huge range of a huge audience. And I think the problem with horror is that while it does have a large audience, I think it's not big enough to sustain a AAA audience, which I think is why Dead Space moved to more of like an action shooter, as well as Resident Evil is moving in that direction, and Capcom is pretty unapologetic about that. They say, basically we've outgrown, the horror audience, and we need to make something that appeals to everyone. And I mean, to be fair, I enjoyed Resident Evil 5 quite a bit. it certainly wasn't really a horror game, and Resident Evil 6 was a disaster, but I don't know if that's entirely the fault of, just taking it into a more action direction. I think they tried to tell like 5 stories and just way overly ambitious, and they probably had a set ship date. So, um, and I mean, certainly, like if you look at movies, there's still plenty of horror games, but they're a lot lower budget than the AAA, or well, I guess they don't call them AAA, but than the Hollywood blockbuster ones, and a lot of times they're like super indie, like like Paranormal Activity or Blair Witch Project. Both had very tiny budgets and ended up being very successful. But let's see. So I think part of the problem with video games is that the entire thing is a special effect. So, for example, if you're doing a movie, maybe you don't need the special effects, but for like an indie game, you can only have a limited amount of content, and I think that's why there's a lot of 2D, a lot of 8-bit, or a lot of games that sort of don't rival AAA in the amount of art content, just because that content is expensive to generate. But so I think basically that with the AAA titles, they want a return on investment that is going to be greater than they can get in the horror genre, because it definitely doesn't appeal to everyone. And, some people are frustrated by, unforgiving mechanics and, or don't appreciate the suspense. And so I think it's unfortunate, but I think it's a good opportunity for indie developers who want to create horror games, such as myself. And I'm really amazed by the number of indie horror games. There's a lot of them in development. I don't know if I was, sort of riding the trend. Certainly it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time, but it definitely seems like there's a lot of people, saying, we want to create a horror game, and we're indie, or indie developers who think horror is a good fit. So I think it's just going to be tough, and I think, I don't know how Evil Within or Alien Isolation will do. Evil Within had some, previews that seemed a little underwhelmed, which maybe isn't the best sign, because usually previews are really positive. But I mean, if the game is not successful, then other publishers will look at that and say, we shouldn't do horror. And it doesn't even matter if it's because the game just is bad. Publishers will say, oh, the issue is that people aren't that interested in horror. So I think it's a we sort of have to resign ourselves to the fact that most interesting horror games will be coming out of the indie sector moving forward, which I guess is a good opportunity for me as an indie developer, because I want to create horror games. But then again, it makes it hard if, being an indie developer doesn't pan out. I'm probably not going to be able to work on horror games anymore, which is sad, but that's life. So anyway, thanks for watching.